Ballot initiatives for medical marijuana are facing another hurdle.
Nebraska's Attorney General says he found more examples of fraud in the signatures collected. Organizers with the medical marijuana petition say the claims are merely technicalities. Brian Mastry explains what's next.
The Nebraska Attorney General claims they've uncovered 49,000 signatures in doubt with the two medical marijuana initiatives that are already on the ballot. Based on newly filed court documents, the state alleges that some signature collectors and then others who officially signed off on those petitions broke the rules. And for that, their logic goes, everything they touched should be tossed. Remember, the Secretary of State already said the thresholds were met to be on the ballot. In fact, since ballots went out last week, Nebraskans are already voting on it. In-person voting began today. What's striking is Secretary of State Bob Evnen in the lawsuit is asking a Lancaster County District Court judge to consider voiding the election results based on the current findings. Nebraska Families for Medical Cannabis reacted with a statement saying the families of this grassroots effort are appalled the state is willing to stop at nothing to deprive Nebraskans a chance to vote on access to medical cannabis. They question the motives of the Secretary of State naming and attacking parents and caregivers who've been fighting for access for a decade, calling it both sickening and wrong. They say Nebraskans should be outraged the state is trying to sidestep the will of the people with alleged notary mistakes on a handful of petitions. This paperwork contains a lot of allegations, but it is a civil case. The state has filed criminal charges against two individuals. One last month, who investigators say the signature collector admitted to taking names out of a phone book for the petition. The new counts of official misconduct are against a notary from York. The state says he gave several petitions the official stamp of approval when he was supposed to have the petition circulator with him, but he wasn't. Civil trial scheduled a few days before Election Day. On your side, Brian Mastry, 6 News.